Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Fluently Forward. Today, we are diving into Robert Pattinson. Who is he really? What do we know about him? What can we finagle about him? What are his relationships like, etc.? And I wanted to do that because his new movie, The Drama, is out as of now when this episode is out, and he's in it with Zendaya, and they are actually in, I think, 3 different projects together this year. They're doing The Drama, they're in the new Dune movie together, and they are in what is it, the Odyssey. And I'm always curious, what do you think of those actor duo pairings who get together and appear in every project together? I'm thinking of Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence. I'm thinking of Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling. I would think on paper that I would hate it, but I kind of do like it. I feel like those four are such well crafted actors that you never feel like you're seeing them in the same movie. Like they're together, but they always seem like different characters. And speaking of, I've heard that Zendaya in this movie, The Drama, people are like, this is something that she's really good in. And I feel like I'm not looking at her, the person, I'm seeing her as her character, which I know is hard for people to do the more and more famous you become. And especially if there's not like a big dramatic change with your hair and makeup. For example, every time I see Harry Styles in something, I'm sorry, but like I'm watching Harry Styles in a movie. I'm not watching whoever his character is. So I'm seeing the movie later. I'm very excited to see it, and I won't be spoiling anything, even though I did have the movie spoiled for me on TikTok. It was so sad. I was on TikTok and I put the drama spoilers into the search bar and it appeared and it showed me the spoilers. I was like, I got spoiled. Hate when that happens, but I wanted to do it because I was so curious because everyone is buzzing about this movie. And as is happening with every movie that comes out now, everybody's going on the press tour and the junket. And you're seeing how the main characters of the film interact with each other as their own person. And you're seeing how the main actors interact with each other, not as their character, but who they are in real life. And a lot of people have been saying that they really like Robert Pattinson and Zendaya's kind of sibling like energy because it feels like for everything, whether it's Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney or Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, everybody's trying to get a little bit of a romantic buzz going around each movie. And people are like, they're not doing it for this one, and we like it. And something else that is also happening with this press junket is a lot of people are bringing up all of the different times that Robert Pattinson has bald-faced lied to the press over the years. He has a habit of there's a little bit of SZA within him because he has a habit of pathologically lying about very mundane things just for the fun of it. And I think he did that for maybe the first 14 years of his career. And now it's come to a head. And what a lot of different people are talking about when they speak to him is, hey, the last time I talked to you, like you said that you could fit your fist in your mouth and you can't do that. Why did you say that? And it's kind of something that Robert Pattinson is becoming known for. And he's not known for a lot. I mean, his name is so well recognized. He's been in everything from Twilight to Batman. He's about to be in Dune. He's a really big actor, but he's notoriously private, which is why it's going to be very fun to dive into him for this episode. I think I have about 18 pages worth of notes. But his lying consistently to the public, mixed with his very public resentment and disdain for having been in the Twilight series, kind of mixed together in a little pot for me. And it made me very excited to think about who he is really. Like, is he a mischievous, cheeky liar, or is he so traumatized by being a Twilight heartthrob in a way that he resents that now he almost treats Hollywood in general like a joke, or he has disdain for it? Like, where is all of that coming from? He seems to really not participate in the Hollywood game that a lot of people do. And it's interesting how we say to Robert Pattinson, of course, if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't do it. But then with someone like Chappell Roan, it's like, shut up, bitch, and like get with the program and like do what you're supposed to do. I will be talking about that a lot within this episode. And I think it's interesting that a lot of celebrities they're kind of encouraged to build a parasocial relationship with their fans. And with Robert Pattinson, even if you wanted to be parasocial with him, you couldn't because he's lying in almost every single thing he says. So if you're a fan and you're like, oh my God, I'm eating a blueberry muffin because Robert Pattinson said that it's his favorite breakfast food, it's probably a lie. Like, we have no idea who this man is. But with the 18 pages I have in front of me, we get kind of close to it. So I'm excited to dive into that. We're also going to check out his blind items, a little bit about his relationship with Kristen Stewart, a heftier part about his relationship with FKA Twigs, Suki Waterhouse with, I'm so sorry, I'm hooked on phonics. Anytime I see the word, I want to say sucky. I know it's Suki. If I mispronounce it at any point, I'm just sorry, but I know that it's Suki Waterhouse and a lot more in this episode. So let's get into it. The first section that I want to start off with is all of his lies, because first of all, they're just kind of funny, and I like talking about things that are funny. And I also think that it ties in nicely to then moving on to the next section about his childhood and where these lies come from. So here are some of my favorite lies of his to talk show hosts, people on red carpets, people who are interviewing him for, I don't know, like character pieces. He has such a vast variety of different lies. One of the top ones that you might have heard of was something that he said to David Letterman in 2009. And he told this story on the late night talk show about how he had been stalked by a fan in Spain for a few days. And every single day, this fan was waiting outside of his apartment. And this was happening in Spain. And that one day, quote, I was so chronically bored that one day she'd been out there for about 3 weeks. And I said, hey, do you just want to go to dinner or something? I mean, no one else wants to hang out with me. So then he tells the story about how he took his stalker fan out to dinner. They went to her parents' restaurant and he complained about everything in his life. And then she ended up sticking him with the bill. And it was this very funny story that people were talking about because they're like, oh my God, Robert Pattinson, like he's so quirky, he's so eccentric. He took his own stalker fan out to dinner. But the twist is that he was so boring and melancholy that she didn't even want to have dinner with him by the end of it. The whole thing was fake. It is like a funny story, just a lot of details for a funny story. And it seems like he kind of improvs all of these on the spot, you know, the little twist that not only did they go out to dinner, but it was her parents' restaurant. Like it must be a very vivid imagination he has when he does these lies. I also do have to shout out one of my favorite lies of his of all time is when he's on the red carpet with Taylor Lautner for something to do with Twilight. And the guy with the microphone is asking the two of them, what's the craziest fan encounter you've ever had? And Taylor Lautner is trying to think of something, but he can't. And then Robert Pattinson comes in and he goes, a fan peed on me once. And the person with the microphone is like, really? And he gives the smirk to the camera and he's like, yeah, they peed on me. And now looking back at the time, you can tell that it was fake, but it really does blur the line that when I saw that back in the day, I remember thinking, that makes sense. He got peed on. So I feel like there's different almost categories to his lies. Something quick like that, I could see it being improv. The story with the stalker going out to dinner with David Letterman, I'm like, you must have thought of that beforehand as like something funny and then come up with it on the show. I have no idea. On the Today Show in 2011, Matt Lauer asked if Rob had ever dreamed of running away to the circus, and he immediately replied saying, well, the first time I went to see the circus, somebody died. One of the clowns died. His little car exploded. The joke car exploded on him. Seriously, everyone ran out. It was terrifying. It was the only time I've ever been to the circus. Matt Lauer ended up pressing him on it. He insisted that it was true. And then years later, rewatching the clip, Robert Pattinson said, quote, there was absolutely no hesitation at all in my voice. I'm like, what on earth? Are you possessed? He went into what he sometimes calls a fugue state because he says that boring press questions make him dissociate. So whenever people ask Robert Pattinson, like, why did you lie so much? He never really has a good answer for it. But sometimes his answer is that when you're on all of these press junkets, everybody's just asking you about what it's like to be famous. And he would just dissociate at the beginning and end up making stuff up for fun. One of the other things he said for fun in 2009, he told Extra that he, quote, didn't really see the point in washing your hair, saying, quote, it's like I don't clean my apartment because I don't care. I have my apartment for sleeping in and I have my hair for just, hanging out on my head. I don't care if it's clean or not. And this stuck around for a good decade with him, so much so that a new article was put out about him in 2014 saying Robert Pattinson is bathing now because I guess 5 years later, he said that like he did wash his hair. It was just one of those rumors that, pun intended, was kind of sticking to him. And I do have to say, that one I almost believed when I first heard it because I feel like celebrities have this uncanny habit of saying that they're unhygienic in an attempt to be relatable to the everyday person. I remember one of the biggest examples of this is Kristen Bell and Dax Shepard, who are always oversharing in their relationship. They told this story about how all of their farts were in the bed and it was like so farty. Let me find it. Okay, this was it. Kristen Bell went on Dax Shepard's podcast and she was talking about how their two daughters sleep in their bedroom every night on the floor, and her and Dax Shepard sleep on something called an Uller mattress pad, which uses this water based system for cooling and heating. It's like a $1,200 mattress pad. So she said earlier that week, the whole family was getting ready for bed and she smelled something really bad. She asked who was farting, and everybody in the room was like, "It's me." And she's like, "Yeah, the whole family has a lot of gas. So I thought it was just everybody farting." But then the next day, the smell was still there. Okay, anyway, this is like so gross. And she decided to sniff different areas of the mattress, and the bottom corner where Dax's feet are, she described it as his feet corner. Apparently, the smell was so bad, she described it as saying that she, quote, almost passed out from the odor. And it turned out that this Uller mattress pad they had was done incorrectly. Apparently, the bed needs to be filled up with water so that way it can cool you down or warm you up. And Dax Shepard had accidentally filled it up with a protein shake. He keeps 2 glasses of water on his messy nightstand every night, but he grabbed an old protein shake he had there instead and refilled the mattress with it instead of water. So, like, not only is that gross, but then also the story about how your family is like farting so much that you couldn't tell where the smell was. It was this era. I forget exactly what year it came out, but almost every single celebrity had a quote that year about something gross or nasty or unhygienic that they were doing. And I almost feel like celebrities use it as a shortcut to be like, "See, I'm just like you. I'm also stinky." And it's like, that's so like, we might be poor, but we're not stinky. Like, you could go to the Dollar Tree right now and get a bar of soap. Like, you don't have to be absolutely grimy and nasty just because you're not a millionaire. But I feel like celebrities, whenever they do that, they're always expecting like a pat on the back. Like, see, I don't know. Anyway, back to Robert Pattinson's career of lying. He's talked about how in early auditions, he would kind of fuck with casting directors. A lot of them were worried about him having a British accent, so he would pretend to be some dude from Michigan. And word got around that Robert Pattinson was a guy who would audition from Michigan. But then he would sometimes come in as a different American person and say that he was a guy from Denver. So his agent would get calls from these casting directors saying, "What the hell is going on with your guy? He's so weird. I know that he's British, but he said one day that he was from Michigan. Then the other day he said he's from Denver. He's not even American. Why is he lying?" And they would say, quote, "What's wrong with him? Why was he doing an improv, a really boring improv?" It's funny. And it's also a little bit of pretty privilege, because I feel like if somebody came in and they were, you know what I mean, like greasy haired, hunchback, kind of strange, and they were lying about where they were from, you would be like, "I don't want this person on my set." Robert Pattinson comes in, he's a tall glass of water, he lies, and you're like, okay, he's just going to be a little bit quirky, but like we're still going to hire him. And that wasn't the only lie that he said to casting directors. When he was a struggling young actor in LA, he told people that he went to the posh, if that's how you pronounce it, it's the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. And he said that he went there with Prince William because he wanted to sound impressive and like royalty and try to land gigs. Now, he never went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, and Prince William didn't either. But I guess some of these casting directors used it and they thought that he was British royalty adjacent and they were happy about it. To that end, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to give him really any slack for that. There's so many different instances, all the way from Mila Kunis on That 70s Show to Jason Earls, or is it Jackson Earls? I think it's Jason Earls on Hannah Montana, or Alexa Demi. So many different people have lied about their age. So if you're going to lie about your connections or like where you're from, I feel like you do what you have to when you're an actor. You try to make it work. He also said, and then recently got called out from Jimmy Kimmel about saying once on his show that he was young, broke, and he slept under an archway in Venice, used trash cans as lids for makeshift roofing, and only had an inflatable pool raft as furniture. And this was something he said back in the day on Jimmy Kimmel. And Jimmy Kimmel ended up, for the drama, having him back on and asking him about all of these lies. And Rob was like, "Yeah, that's not true. I was never homeless living under a canal in Venice." Apparently, the house that he lived in had an archway, so that was where he pulled the lie from. There's about 20 to 25 more of these that I could include, but we have a lot to get to, so I just pulled some of my favorites. He told Willem Dafoe for Interview Magazine about his lying, saying, quote, "There's a little gremlin inside of me that thinks, just say something shocking. You're only here for a few minutes. Say something terrible. There's kind of a perverse glee that I get from that, but I've given my publicist a number of heart attacks." And I do think it's funny. Like, I think it's funny to see all of these. I especially think the thing about a fan peeing on him, like, I do think that that was very funny. But I'm also interested in the media spin that he gets on it. Because when I was doing the research for this, I saw so many different articles. This is just one that I'll name called Six Times Robert Pattinson Magnificently Lied to the Press. And he's the only one who's really getting that spin. So, for example, I'm going to compare him to SZA. SZA has been in hot water for lying about things that are typically small, like on Tumblr lying about having fake freckles or something like that. I remember we did a SZA episode, I don't know, I think on Patreon like 2 years ago. And I remember hearing that. And then when SZA does like a little white lie on Tumblr, or she talks about how she doesn't want to do any quote videos, interviews, or photos for the rest of my life after having a long press run, she gets burned by media coverage. People are like, can we really trust SZA? She's difficult. She doesn't want to be a part of this press junket. Seems like she's lying. She could be unstable. Like, she's basically doing the same thing as Robert Pattinson. Robert Pattinson is like, I fucking hate these press junkets. I'm going to lie to get out of it. And then you see all these headlines and it's like, he's such an eccentric creative that he can improv on the spot. And then meanwhile, somebody like SZA or another female celebrity will say something that's incorrect in an interview. And it's like, should we put them in a conservatorship? Because this is mental illness. They are pathologically lying and we should lock them up for it. It's just something that I notice, not to be like that annoying friend who's too woke, but I'm like, I don't know. Robert Pattinson lies all the time and people think that it's really cute, but I haven't seen that spin for any other celebrity. And to that end, he has said before that it's something that he does because he dissociates during press junkets and everybody's just asking him stupid questions in press, but it's actually not. He's been pathologically lying ever since he was a child. There's so many different examples of this. So back in the day, he was in school for show and tell, and he said that his dad sang Michael Jackson songs. He told everyone in school that his dad had been taking these ginkgo biloba supplements, if I'm even pronouncing that correctly, and those supplements turned his dad's voice into Michael Jackson. So anytime you heard Michael Jackson singing, it was Robert Pattinson's dad. And he got in trouble for that because, you know, he was like lying during show and tell. Then there was also another moment where apparently when he was a teenager in secondary school, he lied to his classmates by pretending to be a drug dealer who imported drugs inside of floppy disks. So he wanted to impress some older cool kids at his school. He said that he was a drug dealer. He didn't know what drugs looked like, but he bought about 40 different floppy disks and he opened them up and filled them with a white powder, which might have been sawdust or something like that. And then he mixed that with a cleaner of Febreze to make them smell like chemicals, and then showed everyone these floppy disks. And one's like, I'm a drug dealer. And I guess people believed him. And when he was 12, he ended up getting expelled from school, not for fighting, not for actually being a drug dealer, but because he was stealing pornographic magazines from a store in his school uniform, and he was then reselling them to his classmates for money. And apparently he got like so bombastic or like cocky with this that he tried to take the entire rack of pornographic magazines. He got caught, all of his friends snitched on him, and then he got expelled. So I just do want to say that to add some color, because I feel like he's saying to press, oh, I only do it because the questions that the press tour ask are so stupid that I have no choice but to lie. And it's like, you've just been a pathological liar since you were a child. Let's just keep it a little bit real here. And I understand that everybody lies, of course, when you're a kid, like that the first moment that you start to lie and flirt with the truth and see what you can get away with. And I think you start doing that at around like age 5, right? You're pushing these boundaries and trying to see what you can or can't say. But it's also one of the things where I'm not going to hold his feet to the stake, but for most regular people like us, we can't just lie every single time we are bored at our job and then have it be written off as like a quirky thing that you just do. Like, you kind of just can't lie at your job, but Robert Pattinson can. That's a theme that's going to come up in the episode. So anyway, since we are talking about his childhood, another interesting fun fact about it is that before Robert Pattinson was Batman or Edward Cullen, he was Claudia when he was a child. And this is kind of an interesting tidbit. When he was young, he had 2 older sisters, and they would dress him up as a doll and they would call him Claudia, and they would introduce him to people. And this was something that apparently they would do for years. They would be like, this is our sister Claudia. And he would be dressed up with like a wig and makeup on and be introduced to people as Claudia. Very interesting. I guess he's always done things off the beaten path, but it did get him into modeling at age 12, and he put those cheekbones to good use. And this was also good because that was around the time that he got expelled from school for selling those magazines. Now, Robert Pattinson didn't actually grow up wanting to be an actor. His real passion when he was younger was music, and it still is. There's even a bunch of fun facts where the scenes in Twilight where he's playing the piano, that's actually him playing the piano. But it was his dad who persuaded him to join the local amateur dramatic society. There was a casting agent who saw him in some production that they were doing, and then he was screen tested as Reese Witherspoon's son in Vanity Fair, but the scenes never made it into the movie. Then in 2005, or I guess this is when the movie came out, but then he ended up landing the role of Cedric Diggory in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. And you would have thought that that was kind of off to the races with him. And it was a really big deal. That's like a huge global movie franchise, but he didn't really get a lot of roles after that. His career kind of went backwards. So a few years went by. I think he did some very small acting roles. And then he was living with a friend in Soho and he started up a career in music. And it seemed like that was going to be the more likely path for him. He had a rock band called Bad Girls and he started playing solo acoustic guitar gigs under the stage name Bobby Dupuis. When he did fly out to LA to give Hollywood a shot, he spent his days playing music in bars or going to the movies, and his agents let him sleep on her couch. Now, this agent had represented Robert Pattinson for 3 years, but he had never nailed an audition, and they were starting to feel pretty bad. But then the role of Edward Cullen for Twilight came up. The director, Catherine Hardwicke, was having a hard time filling the role. She had tried Orlando Bloom. She liked Henry Cavill for the role, but he looked a little bit too old. And apparently, by the time she got to Robert Pattinson's audition, she had auditioned over 5,000 boys for the part, which is crazy. I don't know if I've ever met 5,000 boys in my life, That's just a huge amount. So he said of the moment that he got the audition, quote, "The audition was at Catherine's house in Venice. It was me, her, and Kristen and her assistant videotaping it. Apparently the audition was just like him and Kristen messing around and hanging out on a bed to see if they had any chemistry." He said, quote, "I was the last one of the day and I was in there for 4 hours, which was longer than anyone else before me. So I kind of knew. I was like, something's happened." And I will say, Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, they did have mad chemistry. Even when I go back and I look at the blind items and how she was caught cheating, right, with that director of the Snow White movie that she was in, or there was something going on. I can look back at that and I can totally make a case for the two of them being a PR relationship. But then I also look back on it and I'm like, maybe it was real. I just feel like they did have a little bit of natural chemistry, or at the very least, they didn't hate each other. There was just something about it. Yeah. Man, I miss that era. And Kristen Stewart is now like directing. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Let's go back to the timeline here. There are just a few things of Robert Pattinson talking about Twilight that rub me a little bit the wrong way. And I don't want to come across like I already have my verdict on him because I did 18 pages of research. So I want to like slowly ease into it. But when he was talking about this audition, one of the things that he says afterwards about the experience was, quote, "It was the first time that I'd ever sent an email afterwards as well. Like, I had a really great time in the audition, kissing the director's arse. I always thought that was like the cheesiest, most pathetic thing to do, but it worked." And this is just a theme that you're going to see with Robert Pattinson. I think he almost has a little bit of a view, and I can't tell if it's because you're insecure, so you kind of end up being a little bit shitty, or if you are just a little bit shitty and think that you're above it all. But Robert Pattinson has a lot of quotes within that genre and that spectrum. I think emailing somebody after a job audition or an interview and saying, "Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I hope to hear back from you soon." He says that's the cheesiest, most pathetic thing to do. I think that's nice. I think that's normal. I actually think that's manners and respect. And that's also what regular people do for every job that you apply for. You go in for the job and then you send a note afterwards. "Thanks so much for having me. I hope you consider me. Let me know if there's anything else I can follow up with." Basically, I just think, and you're going to see a lot more quotes of this in the episode, that Robert Pattinson has a bit of a "I'm better than this" attitude, or like, "I shouldn't have to do this," or like, "It would be so beneath me to do something like this" attitude. And because he's handsome and good looking and I don't know, whatever, like he gets away with it in a way that I don't think other celebrities would. Like, for example, one of the things he was doing on this press junket with Zendaya for the drama is they were doing one of those games where you have a board and it's a spectrum of strongly agree to strongly disagree. And you move your marker based on different hot take questions that they ask you. And one of the questions was splitting the bill on a date. And he moved his cup to strongly agree. And he was like very adamantly like, "No, like you split the bill on a date." And Zendaya was being very nice, but also Disney machine, PR junket ready for it. She was like, "Well, you don't know everyone's financial situation," but you could tell she was like, Yeah, like any girl wants a guy to pay for the date. And Rob was just scoffing at it. He's like, no, no. And he kept saying, I actually think when the girl secretly pays for it, like, I really like that. Of course, like everybody in the world wants to be treated, but are you kidding me? You're on the big screen 3 times in 2026. You played Batman. You are like a multimillionaire, famous A-list actor, and you want to split the bill on the date? That's crazy. And I get to say that's crazy because like I told Xander when we first started dating, I was like, I do not want to split things. I'll take one thing, you take another thing. It'll even out. I hate the idea of splitting something like down to the nickel with someone. I'm treating my friends to stuff. I'm like, I'll get this one, I'll get that one. Let me treat for this, let me treat for that. That's what I do as a low level podcaster. So for Rob Pattinson to be like, no, you need to split the bill on every single date, it's just like so annoying. Like, I think there's certain things, whether it's treating somebody on a date that you ask them to, or saying to an audition director, thank you so much for having me. These are things that I think are just polite to do. And I feel like Robert Pattinson is always kind of flipping the buck at it. And once again, you can't even really get mad at him for it because you don't know if he's lying in every single interview that he does. So maybe if you're like, hey, I didn't like your take, you would go, well, I was just lying to get the piss out of you or something. So anyway, back to this timeline, he ends up getting the role of Edward Cullen. Say it, you know what you are. Vampire. You know, he's the big vampire, the sparkly vampire in Twilight. Twilight ends up being this huge, huge success that I don't think anyone expected it was going to be that big. I mean, they knew it would be big because the book was so successful, it was turned into a movie, but the movie just ended up being off to the races. And Robert Pattinson just immediately starts shitting on Twilight, which I do think was interesting because when you look at his timeline, it was kind of his saving grace. He was sleeping on a couch and not getting anything for 3 years, and Twilight was basically his lifeline to get back into Hollywood. And I do find that a little bit of an interesting parallel with a lot of people. I think for a lot of celebrities that we cover on this show, when they get something that's kind of cringy, but they're happy to do it, like it just kind of lands in their lap and it was a good opportunity. I'm thinking of a lot of the people from Riverdale. They usually speak about that experience, even though it's quote unquote cringy or embarrassing, they're always very grateful for it. And instead, I find that when a lot of these celebrities or actors end up booking roles on something that's cringy, and before that, they had a few years of not being successful, they end up very resentful towards that opportunity, which is interesting because you think it would be the opposite, but it's not. So here are some of his anti-Twilight quotes. He told Empire magazine, quote, when you read the book, it's like Edward Cullen was so beautiful, I creamed myself. I mean, every line is like that. He's the most ridiculous person who's so amazing at everything. I think a lot of actors tried to play that aspect. I just couldn't do that. And the more I read the script, the more I hated this guy. So that's how I played him, as a manic depressive who hates himself. Which, by the way, I would love to see Edward's manic phase. I think he was like only ever depressive. But anyway, he continues by saying, plus, he's a 108-year-old virgin, so he's obviously got some issues there. So basically, Robert Pattinson gets this role and he tries to make it something very dark and intellectual and moody. And at the end of the day, like it is a fan fiction book. You know what I mean? So he got the role of Edward Cullen and he tried to make this like dark psychological portrait out of him, not a romantic lead, but like this depressive guy in crisis and what's really going on underneath the surface. He told GQ that he wanted to make Edward Cullen, quote, as arty as possible, which resulted in studio executives telling him that he was being, quote, too emo. And once again, I could see both sides of that. Like, it's always nice to dive deep into a character, and sometimes you're not given a lot to work with, and you end up going deeper with it. Like, I feel like Jamie Campbell Bower, who we covered on the podcast a couple months ago, he played Vecna and Mr. Whatsit and that character in Stranger Things. And he took the character to a place that was a lot deeper than I think the Duffer brothers were writing it. And that was good. But then I also see a little bit of the hypocrisy in doing something like that, because at the end of the day, when you have a job, you have to play the character the way it is. And this isn't just a script being written. The character was already developed in the book. So that is who Edward Cullen is. And at the end of the day, you're booking a job. This idea of like, I know best what this character should do. You haven't got a job in the past 3 years. Maybe just do what you're supposed to do. And it's just interesting how, once again, Robert Pattinson gets that shine for wanting things to be different. People are like, oh my God, he wanted to make Edward Cullen this deep psychological character. How great of him. When really, it seems like he was just kind of fucking with the studio executives and trying to be difficult on purpose. Meanwhile, you look at a female actress, I don't know, Blake Lively charged up a lot of like wardrobe on It Ends With Us, and everybody's like, she's the devil incarnate because she wanted to take over the movie. And then you see male actors like Robert Pattinson doing this all the time, and it's like, no, 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 they just love the craft. So he ended up escalating with this for so long that the producers ended up giving Robert Pattinson a copy of the Twilight book, and they highlighted in a different color every single instant where the Edward Cullen character smiled, because they were like, look at this book, look at how much he's smiling in it. You need to be more upbeat. And then Robert Pattinson took a different color highlighter and he highlighted all of the times that Edward Cullen frowned. So he was basically doing this like one man resistance operation to everybody on the set. I'm sure they were like, Jesus Christ, like we looked at 5,000 different actors and this one's like, it's like an uphill battle with him. But yeah, he was very defiant that he didn't want to play Edward Cullen in that way. And whatever they ended up settling on, who knows who ended up winning that battle and like which version of Edward Cullen we got in the film. It was good. I don't think anyone thought that his portrayal of it was absolutely incredible. So who knows whose version won. But anyway, this resistance that he was doing was so bad that his agents ended up having to fly in and they told him, quote, whatever you're doing right now after lunch, just do the opposite or you'll be fired by the end of the day. And then he came back after lunch and he was like, hi, look at me. I want to keep my job. And I'm just shouting this out because over on Patreon last week, I did a whole episode all about the blacklist in Hollywood and how Harvey Weinstein operated, and Alfred Hitchcock and Tippi Hepton and all of these different stories of women who have been blackballed in the industry because they didn't put out for a director or a producer. And then all these rumors go around that this actress is a nightmare to work with. You don't want to hire her. And it's Harvey Weinstein on the phone to everybody because a girl didn't want to suck him off. And what's just crazy about that, not to like get too rowdy on here, but Robert Pattinson, his agents had to fly in and say, you need to change your attitude. But have you ever heard that he was a nightmare on set, or that he's totally drama, or that he's really hard to work with? No. But he was, they were giving him the book highlighted and he was highlighting the other pages and giving that back. It's just a privilege that a female actress on that set never would have had. So anyway, he just goes on shit talking the book. He said, quote, I was convinced that this woman, Stephanie Meyer, who wrote it, is mad. She's completely mad and she's in love with her own fictional creation. He also said, quote, it's a weird story, Twilight. It's just not like, it's strange how people responded a lot to it. I guess the books are very romantic, but at the same time, it's not like The Notebook romantic. Twilight is about this guy and he finds the one girl he wants to be with and he also wants to eat her. Quote, if it hadn't been so successful, I think people would have thought that it was really weird. And I get that. Like, obviously, I don't think anyone's saying that Twilight deserves like a Pulitzer or anything like that. You're entitled to your own opinion. But I think it's also interesting because you are working a job. And once again, this is just a little bit of male privilege that you don't see on the other side. With any of the female cast of Game of Thrones, if they simply, not even saying anything bad about Game of Thrones, if they just say that they haven't read Game of Thrones, they get shit on. In the Marvel universe, if you're a female actress working on the set, even if you say that you love comic books and video games a la Brie Larson, even if you say that you love it, then you're questioned for like, well, do you actually authentically love it? Or are you just trying to fake that you actually like it? And then meanwhile, we have Robert Pattinson, who's like, everything about this is shit. I hate it. It's so embarrassing. It's so cringe. And people are like fine with it. And once again, I'm not saying that I want him burned at the stake. I'm just saying that it's another example of how things are so unfair. And I think Robert Pattinson just skates away a little bit cleaner from a lot of situations than other people would. So anyway, in reading all of these different interviews and pieces with Robert Pattinson, I did start to notice that there was just a bit of an air of something, both him describing himself and other people describing him as being a little bit above it all. So for example, here's one of his quotes about what he looks for in a role. He said, quote, what I look for is when a piece has its own language. It doesn't necessarily feel like it just exists for its own sake and has a presence that hums with a bit of life. It has the ability to communicate with you on kind of a primordial level. To me, that just sounds like corporate jargon, and his corporate workplace is media and the theater, but it's still corporate jargon nonetheless. I'm just personally of the belief, and I don't want to sound like I'm anti-intellectualism here, but I'm just of the belief that you need to be able to know something really well is to be able to describe it very simply. And if you can't describe it simply, then you don't know something very well. And there's something hiding underneath that. So, one of the quotes that I really love about art and creation and all of that comes from Ernest Hemingway. And it's in his memoir, A Movable Feast. And he says, this is his defining quote on writing. And he also gives it advice to people who have writer's block and what they should do. He says, quote, all you have to do is write one true sentence. Write the truest sentence that you know. And that's one of the quotes that Ernest Hemingway is known for. And I find it so great. He's basically saying if you struggle with writer's block or being creative, and this is a similar concept in the Julia Cameron book, The Artist's Way, which we covered, we did like a whole workshop on it for like a couple months over on Patreon. Love The Artist's Way. But one of the things that she talks about is just being true. And that's what Ernest Hemingway is saying too. If you have writer's block, if you're struggling creatively, just focus on what's honest and what's minimal and authentic. And that matters so much more than this like fancy, flowery, purple prose. And there's a book that I read when I was in Chicago at the Second City for my semester of comedy studies. And it was basically the semester that I did in college. I was at the Second City in Chicago and we were trained in improv and stand-up and script writing and all these different comedic facets, basically. And one of the books that we had to read as homework was Truth and Comedy by Del Close. And a lot of people talk about him as the master and the god of improv. And the whole onus basically of improv is that a lot of people think to do improv comedy, you have to be funny. You don't. You have to be a good listener and you have to be honest. And those are the building blocks of good improv. And when you look at Del Close and what he has to say about comedy or what Ernest Hemingway has to say about writing, what you really find is that the basis of art, like all good art, comes from truth, whether that's comedy, writing, film, even a music video. Like it all comes from a place of truth. And that's what makes it so profound and so fantastic. And I find it interesting that Robert Pattinson is famous for lying, you know? And I'm not saying that like he's lying, he's never told the truth, but that's what he's known for. And that's what he almost deflects to as like his automatic response. And I think truth is so great for art, but I also think that truth represents vulnerability. And that vulnerability leads to great art. And I think Robert Pattinson gears a lot more on the side of detachment, making fun of something, being a little bit elitist, being a little bit above something, and lying for fun. So when I think of Hemingway's quote of write the truest sentence that you know, I wonder what's the most true, authentic, and vulnerable sentence we've heard from Robert Pattinson. I don't need to be hearing stories about how everyone in his family is farting on the bed, but throughout his entire storied career, have we heard a vulnerable sentence from him once, ever? And to this end, you might say, well, yeah, he's just doing it for press conferences. Not really. He's been lying since he was a kid. And then you might say, well, yeah, Twilight was really cringe. Not really, because then he got the role of Batman and he was still shitting all over Batman. Here's what he said about Batman, quote, I've definitely found a little interesting thread. He doesn't have a Playboy persona at all, so he's kind of a weirdo as Bruce and a weirdo as Batman, and I kept thinking that there's a more nihilistic slant to it. So once again, Robert Pattinson isn't trying to find the truth of these characters and play them well, whether it's Edward Cullen, Bruce Wayne, Batman. Instead, he wants to put this like cynical emo blend that he has on every single character to make it deep because then he thinks that it's valuable. And it's like the deepness is there. You just need to be comfortable enough with yourself to be able to see it and act it. So yeah, maybe he's shitting all over Edward Cullen and that's Twilight, but then he also gets one of the most famous roles in the entire world of Batman. And he's saying that Batman's a weirdo, Bruce Wayne is a weirdo, there's probably a more nihilistic slant to it. When are you ever going to be happy? And you can tell that this is kind of the air he walks around with because it's in quotes that other people use to describe him. I always like seeing how other people are described by others. The Twilight producer, Wick Godfrey, says about Robert Pattinson, quote, I think he's made really smart choices. He has a deep desire to earn the status he has, and those films both have hardcore directors and quality material. I think it speaks more to who Rob is than the Twilight series because he comes from a literary background. He shows up to set reading Moliere. I don't know who that is. I guess it's an author. I read Stephanie Meyer. The director of Breaking Dawn, Bill Cawden, describes Robert Pattinson as super smart, saying, quote, that's the first thing you notice. He's very thoughtful and analytical, and he's a cineast, you know? He loves a lot of genres and actors, so he seems like someone who can't wait to go explore. And he's being described by these people as showing up to set, reading these literary books. And he has a deep desire to earn the status that he has. He makes smart choices. He's super smart. He's very analytical. And of course, those are great things, right? Like, it's cool to be smart. It's a good thing to be smart. It's good to be thoughtful and analytical. I just don't think that I buy it with him. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I think that to be thoughtful about something is to be thoughtful about anything, not just only thoughtful about things that you personally deem deep and highbrow. One of the things that I really liked about Harry Styles when we did our deep dive episode on him like last month was about how Harry Styles was happy about having young teenage girl fans. He was like, they like my music, and I'm so happy about that. They knew that the Beatles were great, and look how great the Beatles were. You wouldn't say that they were awful because they had teenage fans, would you? Teenage girls know what's going to be popular. They have their finger on the pulse. And I was like, yes, Harry Styles. Thank you, Harry Styles. You can be goofy and do things that are lowbrow and then still be somebody who's thoughtful and analytical. And one of the examples I think of when I think of this is Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino. He wrote on 30 Rock, he was in Community, he's done different bits and goofs and gags on sitcoms that are so stupid, goofy, lowbrow humor, but I still take him so seriously as an actor and a director and everything that he's done, whether it's with Atlanta or his work with as Childish Gambino. I think that he is a renaissance man because he can dive into so many different genres at so many different levels of depth and do it really, really well. And I think if you're going to be thoughtful and analytical, you should apply that lens to everything you do, not just the stuff that you personally deem worthy of it. Because, yeah, you can make fun of Twilight and be like, yeah, it's some shitty movie that just happened to get lucky and get famous. But, like, if you're somebody who's shitting on it, you go ahead and make a shitty movie and have it get famous because idiot girls like it. Can you do that? You haven't done it yet. Anyway, I guess I'm getting just like a little bit heated because I feel like so many people are just like critics, critics, critics of things that women and especially young women like, and they think that it's fine to do so. And one of the things that stuck out to me is that there is a quote from Robert Pattinson himself where he says this, quote, "If I do decide one day to stop acting, I just hate the idea of people going, oh, did you ever do anything else besides that Twilight thing?" That quote to me sums up a lot about Robert Pattinson. It reminds me of Timothée Chalamet's quotes about wanting to be one of the greats and everything like that. I think that Timothée Chalamet and probably Robert Pattinson too is somebody who builds their self-worth and their ego from the outside in. He's worried about his reputation. He's not saying in that quote, man, if I stop acting, what if I never get the chance to play a villain or to make this script I love come to life? Or even, what if I never get an Oscar? He's not worried about that. Instead, he's saying, if I one day do decide to stop acting, I hate the idea of people going, oh, did you ever do anything else besides that Twilight thing? He's worried about his reputation from a bunch of people. He's not worried about like the craft or the art or what he himself intrinsically from the inside out wants to do. He's just worried about only being perceived as some sparkly vampire. And in a way, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Joe Jonas. Joe Jonas, of course, had the reputation of being a virginal promise ring Jonas brother, part of the Disney machine growing up. And I think because of that, it has led to Joe Jonas specifically, much more so than Kevin or Nick, acting out in certain ways. And once again, I'm going to bring up the AMA that he did a few years ago on Reddit because I just found it so enlightening to me of who Joe Jonas is as a person. He was just putting on this cloak on the AMA, and I feel like he does it now with TikTok videos of being like, I'm actually really cool and like avant-garde and intellectual. And if I did something that was cringe, I was doing it satirically and like turning it on its head, but like I'm really in control. And like I'm actually a cool guy just like you. And it's something that I notice in Joe Jonas. It's something I notice in Timothée Chalamet. It's something I notice in Robert Pattinson. And it's this idea that I actually want to be seen as cool and creative and intelligent. And it's like, it's great. It's great that you want to be seen as cool, creative, and intelligent. Those are good things to be. Of course, you want to be seen as that. But for years, a bunch of people, particularly young women, for all three, Robert Pattinson, Timothée Chalamet, and Joe Jonas, young women for years have thought that you were cool, creative, and intelligent. They've supported you. They've believed in you. They've thought that you were amazing. Doesn't matter to you because it's just stupid girls' opinions, so they don't matter. It doesn't count. You need to be taken seriously, which means not having a bunch of young girls as fans. You need to have men take you seriously, and you won't stop until that happens. And that's what I see in Joe Jonas's Reddit AMA. That's what I see in Timothy Chalamet going on all of these manosphere podcasts. And that's what I see in a lot of the eccentric and literary things that Robert Pattinson does. I need to be taken seriously by a bunch of people that aren't teenage girls, because teenage girls, what the fuck is their value? And by the way, if you're a fan of Rob Pattinson and you're getting mad at me for saying this, you actually can't be mad legally, because he said it himself. So back in 2012, Robert Pattinson said this quote: "I was really fighting to not look pretentious for years. And when someone gives you 1 inch of the possibility of being pretentious," referring to a moment at the Cannes Film Festival, where he was asked about his craft, he says, quote, "And you're like grabbing it so hard, going around being the biggest douchebag." He laughed. He then said, quote, "I've kind of reined it in again," about his lapse into douchebaggery. So I hope he has reined it in, because some of these quotes of his, I'm clocking it. And he even himself is admitting, yeah, sometimes I can be a douchebag. Anyway, let's get into some of his relationships. One of the relationships that I want to talk about is when he was dating FKA Twigs. And that's not her real name, but I feel like ever since the Chapel Roan stuff, I'm like, would it be offensive to use her real name? So I'm just going to say FKA Twigs, because I don't want to ruffle any feathers. So there were whispers of Robert Pattinson and FKA Twigs dating, and this was in the summer of 2014. Apparently, he attended one of her concerts with some of his celebrity friends, and they played matchmaker. So by September 2014, they were confirmed as a couple. And this is when they were photographed in Miami, and they were walking hand in hand in Venice. And these were two British artists. They were both critically acclaimed in their own respective lanes, acting and singing. It was both kind of unusual for them to get together, because I feel like FKA Twigs has always been so avant-garde, and Robert Pattinson back in 2014 did kind of have the Twilight thing attached to him. But the two of them got together, and I feel like they really did make sense as a couple. So, by the way, FKA Twigs, when you're out with your friends and you come back home and you're just playing music videos for 2 hours as you continue drinking and eating and stuff like that, if you need a good music video or a live performance to put on during music video hour with your friends, FKA Twigs performing Figure Eight and In Time. This was live at the MOBO Awards in 2015. I don't even know what the MOBO Awards are, but this video, I have showed it to so many people. It is one of those performances where they're going to think that you're really cultured and you have really good taste at music video hour, because it's just such a good performance. It's entrancing every time I watch it. So anyway, you should watch that video. And at this time, FKA Twigs, she just had a debut album and it had dropped, and it was getting all of this critical acclaim everywhere. The Wall Street Journal called her music darkly avant-garde, aggressive, and atmospheric. So I'm sure he liked it, because it wasn't pop music, but it was darkly avant-garde. But everybody was like, who is FKA Twigs? She's incredible. She was collaborating with all of these musical standouts. People were calling her the future of experimental R&B. There were all these good things on the horizon. Then she gets photographed with Robert Pattinson. It comes out that they're dating, and people start losing their mind. Obviously, this is an interracial relationship. And 1 week after it became public that they were dating, she had to make a statement on Twitter, because she was getting all of this hate speech, all of these racist comments that were written by Robert Pattinson's fans directed to her on Twitter. So that next week after they went public, she had to say that she felt, quote, "genuinely shocked and disgusted at the amount of racism that has been infecting my Twitter account." This was just 1 week after them being public, not a few months in, 1 week. And at the time, people would find pictures of monkeys and put them up to FKA Twigs and have her doing the same things as the monkey. She described it later on the Louis Theroux podcast by saying, quote, "It was really, really deeply horrific. And I think it was at a time where I felt like I couldn't really talk about it. I feel like if I was going through that now, I would be able to talk about it and do some good with it." But yeah, this was back in 2014, which is, well, oh my God, I'm so bad at math. This would have been 12 years ago, I am certain. And I know that 12 years ago seems like it's not that far away, but culturally it really was. And also for FKA Twigs in this moment, she wasn't a very storied artist. And Robert Pattinson had such this big shine to her name that I'm sure she probably felt like she was at a place where she was like, if I say anything about this, people are going to think that I'm doing it just for attention or clout, or that I'm dating him just for attention and clout. Now, 2014, this was 2, 3 years before the Me Too movement. So I know that it feels like it's, not that long ago in the past, but it kind of culturally is a long time away. And one of the other creepy things about this is back in 2014, we didn't really have the dead internet theory or bot campaigns or smear campaigns via bots going around. So all of this racist hate that she was getting on Twitter, it was coming from real people. And it was coming specifically from his fans and people who were like, he should be with Kristen Stewart. He should be with insert name of different white woman here. And part of it, which she's hinted at in interviews and we're going to go into later, is that she didn't have a partner, AKA him, who was standing in her corner and defending her from all of this. So what makes it even worse is that in all of these different interviews that were happening while they were dating, FKA Twigs would be the one to defend him in different interviews and explain to journalists why the relationship was worth it. And Robert Pattinson wasn't doing any of that. So she spoke to The Guardian about pushing on with him, despite the fact that a lot of people were like, we don't like this relationship, blah, blah, blah. She said, quote, it's like, is this person in my life worth that? And he is, without question. She also said that she was unsure whether the hate was, quote, because of my age or whether it was because of the social climate or whether it was because I was Black and from Cheltenham. I think that's like an area in England. I don't know. And from a low income family and having to work genuinely twice as hard at everything I do to get a seat at the table. So just picture what she's going through, right? She's been trying for years to break into the industry. She's a working class Black woman who grinded her way into the creative industry. She was able to drop her debut. All of these people are praising it. She finally did it. And then a week later, after being spotted with Robert Pattinson, all of that disappears overnight and everybody's just being racist and hateful towards her. So for over a year, from September 2014, this was when it all started, to September 2015, Robert Pattinson says nothing. He defends her zero. He says nothing. A year of her tweeted about being genuinely shocked and disgusted by this, a year of her giving interviews where she's the only one defending him and the relationship. Silence, silence, silence for a year, which, by the way, not for nothing, Justin Bieber has done more to defend Hailey Baldwin in the early days when they were dating. Justin Bieber did more to defend himself dating Sophia Richie than Robert Pattinson did with FKA Twigs. If you're doing less than Justin Bieber, like there's something wrong. So anyway, then in September 2015, which once again is a full year after all of this started, timed for a press junket for his film, Life, that he was promoting, he gives an interview where he finally addresses what's going on with FKA Twigs, and here's what he says in full. Okay, get a load of this quote. He says, I was talking to my dad about this, and I bet him that if he looked up Nelson Mandela's funeral on YouTube, the first comment would be a racist one. And it was, with like 1 million upvotes. What I don't get is why. I think it's because most normal people are not commenters. I've never met anyone who's left a comment on anything. It's just demons who live in basements. You have this weird thing where you end up trying to fight against this faceless blob, where the more you hate it, the bigger it gets because it's all in your head. The media really praised him for this quote, like Robert Pattinson, like speaking up and speaking out. And I'm sorry, but like I don't super follow the logic with this. First of all, racism doesn't just exist, it persists. You know what I mean? Like I just feel like it persists by white people not immediately denouncing it when it happens and being like, this is fucked up, this is wrong, I don't like it, I don't stand for it, I don't agree with it. You saying nothing while your girlfriend is harassed by racist people for a year, to me, it's just like you're not saying nothing. You're saying something by saying nothing. It comes across as like a cosign or a I don't care type of demeanor. And I know that Robert Pattinson has an I don't care demeanor with just about everything in his life. But when it comes to your girlfriend suffering at the hands of these trolls for years, you do something. Also, I really hate how he starts off this quote by, what was it? I was talking to my dad about this, and I bet him that if he looked up Nelson Mandela's funeral on YouTube, the first comment would be a racist one. And it was. Oh my God, congratulations, you won the bet against your dad. I hope you definitely didn't say that to FKA Twigs. Like, it just reminds me, it stings me in the same way that when people talk about Jeffrey Epstein, I hate these comments online when people are like, well, it's not surprising that XYZ would happen. Or when they say all those quotes online, fork found in kitchen, not surprising, not surprising. Maybe it's not surprising to, it should be surprising to you. Every single time something heinous happens in the world, we should at least be disappointed. And we shouldn't have this like assholery behavior of like, I could have told you that was coming. Maybe to somebody who these issues don't affect, then that's why you have the attitude of like fork found in kitchen, or like I could have told you that was going to happen. Yeah, because these issues don't affect you. So it's just another disappointing day in the park. It's not for people who are at the receiving root of all of these issues. It's a matter of life or death sometimes. So like say something. It just like it pisses me off, like the pretension in that quote, the fact that he waited a year to say something so you had time to draft something. And then that's what you come out with. Like this idea of such is life, men are always going to rape, powerful people are always going to do things, there will always be racist trolls in basements, such is life. Why are you being so laissez-faire about it? Don't you want to stamp this out? Don't you want to make things better? Even the word, like now I'm really like diving into it, but even the usage of him saying the word just, it's just demons who live in basement, just demons who live in basements. They probably made your girlfriend cry multiple nights. They probably ruined days or weeks of her life, and they're just demons who live in basements. And then he ends this quote. This is the most wild part to me, where he suggests that fighting back against racism only makes it bigger. He advises not responding, which conveniently is what he had done for the prior year. But yeah, saying you have this weird thing where you end up trying to fight against this faceless blob where the more you hate it, the bigger it gets because it's all in your head. First of all, you end up trying to fight against this faceless blob. I don't think he was ever a keyboard warrior on behalf of FKA Twigs. Like, I don't think he actually ever did anything. I think he just intellectualized the problem and said that he didn't have to stand up for her. And with male protector boyfriends like this, who needs enemies? Like, what he should have said, or what he could have said, or what he had the chance to say is this racism is unacceptable, and I'm ashamed of my fan base for directing it at the woman that I love, et cetera, et cetera. But instead, he's so freaking pretentious that he gets philosophical about like racism and internet culture. And like, I bet my dad that there would be a racist comment on YouTube. And sure enough, there was. Okay, good. Like you won the bet. Just this thing of like, it's happening to your girlfriend. It's happening to your girlfriend. And instead you want to talk about it like from a bird's eye view. Here's what I think about racism on the internet. Shut up. Like we're not asking you to philosophize on it. We're asking you to protect the woman that you're supposed to love. And what's crazy is that the press, once again, like they must be obsessed with Robert Pattinson. I'm the only one who's like, no, look at him differently. But anyway, the press gave him a gold star for his quote and speaking on it. As if he did anything. So anyway, back to their relationship. They broke off their engagement quietly in 2017. There wasn't really like an explanation or a press statement. It was just gone. But then 2 years later, FKA Twigs releases an album, and it was inspired allegedly by her breakup with Robert Pattinson. Critics called it her masterpiece. Pitchfork gave it Best New Music. It's a really good breakup album. It opens with Thousand Eyes, which is a track about how severing ties, allegedly with Robert Pattinson, she found herself under the scrutiny of 1,000 eyes. And then the song that most people will know is Cellophane. Didn't I do it for you? And allegedly, a lot of people think that it's about Robert Pattinson, and it's repeatedly asking questions like, what's the main lyric? Yeah. Didn't I do it for you? Why don't I do it for you? Why won't you do it for me when all I do is for you? And that's the central lyric. And it's kind of like the overtone of what probably happened in their relationship. And it's this idea of a relationship being wrapped in cellophane. So it's seemingly protected by the outside world, but it's completely transparent. So you're not actually safe within it. And I don't know if that was the music video she did where she was forever on a pole dancing down to hell. And then when Lil Nas X did his music video, people were like, you're so creative for pole dancing down to hell. It's been done before by FKA Twigs. Anyway, also everything she's been through with Shia LaBeouf too. Like, anyway, we're almost wrapping up this section. But a few years later, she finally spoke at length about this relationship on that podcast in 2021 that I referenced earlier. This was about 4 years after they broke up. And she didn't like rake Robert Pattinson over the coals specifically, but she described the damaging stuff that happened to her within that relationship. Here are some of her quotes. She said, "People talk about Black excellence, but that is because we have to be excellent to be considered average. I worked so hard just to get a little seat at the table. And then I got there and people just called me the most hurtful and ignorant names on the planet." She said about being harassed by these people on Twitter, quote, "I remember it had this massive dysmorphic effect on me for about 6 months to a year, where every time I saw my pictures and photographs, I would think, gosh, I look like a monkey and people are going to say I look like a monkey. So I really need to try and hide this monkeyness that I have because otherwise people are going to come for me about it." you could cry. It's like imagine somebody's going through that and like you don't do anything. And I know people could be saying, like, anyone who's a big stan of Robert Pattinson could be like, well, it's behind the scenes. I bet he was like helping her with things. The fuck does behind the scenes do? And then also from the quote that we do have from him on this, I just really don't have a good vote of confidence that like he handled any of this well behind the scenes with what his quote was to the press. So anyway, so let's move on to his current relationship and the tea on it, and that is him with not Suki, but Suki Waterhouse. And I'm curious about their relationship because for years, the blind items have spun such a narrative of this relationship of Robert Pattinson and Suki Waterhouse being like, she always wants the paparazzi to take photos and he does not. And she's always telling them where they are and he's always getting pissed off. And they kind of spin her as a little bit of a clout chaser about it. But by the end of the section, I have a little bit of a different angle on it. So anyway, how did he meet Suki Waterhouse? This was in the summer of 2018. They were at some like big wig Hollywood game night with a bunch of famous people, and they were playing the game Werewolf. And apparently, the two of them were giggling at the absurdity of the whole game, and they got told off by people playing the game. There was some unnamed director at that game night who separated them during the intense game because they were giggling so much. And I would say, if you're like in the flirtation stage with someone or you just met someone that night and you're playing a game and you keep laughing together so much that a director needs to separate you, I feel like this very rom-com behavior, you know? So anyway, they didn't exchange numbers that night, but Suki, I don't know why I want to say Suki so bad. I should have just called it something different in the doc. Suki said about the encounter that it, quote, had percolated something. I think Rob's quite funny. I light up when I'm around him. So they didn't get each other's numbers, but they did a few months later. And by the way, if you don't know who Suki Waterhouse is, she was discovered as a model in either a Topshop or an H&M when she was 16. She then went on to model. She's modeled for Burberry, Balenciaga, and Dior. She acted in Daisy Jones and the Six, which got a lot of attention. She was in the Divergent series, The Bad Batch, and she does make music. She had that one song go pretty viral that was like, the skylight falls as I try to make sense of it all. And I don't know if I've ever really listened to much of her music, but I will say she's got nice bangs. And I feel like, I don't know, I'm going to be so fucking nasty. But I feel like with certain people, like both Suki Waterhouse and Joe Jonas, I feel like they have that aspect about them where every time I see a fan edit of them on TikTok, I'm like, they're also watching the same fan edit. Do you know what I mean? Ooh, sorry for saying that. But anyway, I don't think she's ever had like an espresso style hit, but she makes music. And as we found out in this episode, apparently Robert Pattinson also does make music as well. So anyway, they reconnected a few months after that werewolf game night through different like overlapping social circles that they were a part of. And she said that life in LA, quote, definitely became a lot more fun when she met him. She talks a lot about how funny he is. Funny, funny, funny. So they had both come out of kind of public relationships at the time. Obviously, he had ended his relationship to FKA Twigs in 2017. She had come out of a relationship with Diego Luna in 2017. And before that, she was dating Bradley Cooper for 2 years. If you have seen the pictures, tell me you have, because they stay stuck in my mind of Suki Waterhouse and Bradley Cooper doing like a PR paparazzi shot of them on a date in the park, I think in New York. And they're both on this random patch of grass in some park. And they're reading the book Lolita, but they're both reading it together. Like she's sitting in his lap in the grass while he's holding open the book Lolita and reading it to her. What? Yeah, like obviously I still think of those photos because what was that? What was going on there? What? I don't know. It's just weird. Look it up if you want a little bit of a tickle in your day. Anyway, they were together, and for the first couple of years, people really couldn't tell if they were dating each other or not because obviously none of them were speaking about it privately. It was just whispers of things. In April 2019, Rob was asked about Suki in an interview at the Sunday Times, and he responded by saying, quote, "Do I have to?" He added by saying, if you let people in, it devalues what love is. If a stranger on the street asked you about your relationship, you'd think it extremely rude. If you put up a wall, it ends better. Okay, Joe Alwyn. I just find that interesting when celebrities are not private about their relationship, but secret about it, because there is a difference. And also, not for nothing, but if a stranger asked me on the street about my relationship, I would be happy to talk about it. I'd be like, let me tell, I have a picture of him. He makes ramen by scratch. We like to play the same video games. He's so thoughtful. Oh my God, swipe, swipe, swipe. What is interesting though is the Joe Alwyn comparison because Rob and Suki would allegedly go on double dates with Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn. So in the first like 4 years that they were dating, apparently they were spotted at concerts. They were photographed leaving clubs at 2 a.m. They were seen on double dates with Taylor Swift and Joe Alwyn. They were photographed going to see Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again in Notting Hill. And then they got drinks at Soho House after. Very British type of date. And they lived together during the pandemic. And it wasn't until late 2022, so 4 years later, that they actually made their first red carpet debut as a couple. They attended the Dior fashion show in Egypt together. So isn't that pretty crazy? I always just find that wild. Like they were together for 4 years, they lived together. Apparently, they were maybe engaged. There were rumors, and they were about to announce a pregnancy that ended up happening later, but the red carpet is something that doesn't happen. I always just find it interesting because I almost did today's episode on Zendaya and Tom Holland because they're also very private and she's in the drama. And I was like, let me see if I can find out anything about their relationship because I like being creepy. And I was doing my research on it. And let me tell you, I like really couldn't find out much. But what I did see in the timeline for them, which by the way, if you ever want the episode, let me know because I already did the research for it, is that they both shout each other out. They're always posting like a tribute to the other person on Instagram on their birthday. They have said quotes about the other person. They're not talking about the fart bed a la Kristen Bell and Dax Shepard, but they're shouting each other out in a few ways. And you can tell that they love each other, even though their relationship is still private. Like, I don't know any rituals that they have or what meals they like to eat. I couldn't really find out any of the details. And apparently they got married recently and nobody knows. So their relationship is private. They do a really good job of it, but it's not like suspicious and secret in the way that Joe Alwyn and Robert Pattinson and Suki Waterhouse is. And you can't say it's a British guy thing because Tom Holland is British. So I don't know. It's just always felt like a very secretive to me. And you're going to see more of that as we continue on. Now, the crazy days and nights blind items around Rob and Suki have just for years always painted the story of her being a little bit clout chase. That apparently a foreign born A-list mostly movie actor was getting really tired of reading quotes from him in tabloids that he didn't say, but his girlfriend says are from him. So there's a lot of blind items to summarize them that says that she feeds quotes to the tabloids and says that Rob says it, but he didn't, and he gets pissed when he finds out. Or that they're on a date and she told the paparazzi that they would be on a date so they could get photos of him and them together, and he realizes that and is upset about it. There's all these different blind items too, saying that he's, quote, spending as little time as possible with the woman who calls himself his girlfriend. And that, quote, she is in a lot of trouble behind the scenes right now and things are messy, that she calls the paparazzi on their outings. And at first, when I was reading all of these blind items over the years, I was like, damn, it sounds like it's clout chasing. You know, she wants to be seen with Robert Pattinson. But now, as I think about his relationship with FKA Twigs and some of these different quotes that we're going to get to, I'm like, maybe it's less so that she's clout chasing. I mean, who knows? Maybe she is. But maybe it's more so that she's tired of feeling like a secret and she wants people to know, like, we are in fact publicly together. Like, you know, when you're dating a guy and he's very secretive about you and he's not like shouting his love about you publicly from the rooftops, you kind of get like a little bit crazy. I feel like it's always in those relationships where I'm like, get me jewelry with your name on it or something like that. Ooh, now that I'm thinking about it, you know how Taylor Swift is like, I want to wear his initial on a chain round my neck, chain round my neck. Ooh, this is in real time. I'm discovering this because I feel like when you're with a guy and he's not showing you off, you kind of creatively try to find other ways to be like, he does care about me. I am important. Like, I want to show us as a connected together match somehow. So I almost wonder if like that's what she does by allegedly calling the paparazzi or the tabloids or something. Because even some of their quotes together, okay, this was from a February 2023 interview with the Sunday Times, and she said about Rob, quote, I'm shocked that I'm so happy with someone for nearly 5 years. I'm always incredibly excited when I see his name pop up on my phone or even a text, and I think he feels the same about me. We've always got so much to say, and I find him hilarious. So they had been together for almost 5 years at that time. And she goes, I'm always excited when I see his name pop up on my phone. And I think he feels the same about me. And I think he feels the same about me. Like, they lived together during the pandemic. Like, if I was with someone for 5 years and then I was like, I love him so much and I think he feels the same about me, let's just say, like, I know myself, I would be having acid reflux every morning, diarrhea every night. I would be so anxious being in a relationship like that. It couldn't be me. And then there's also other quotes too. She told British Vogue that Rob Pattinson has, quote, a lot of humor about her exes and didn't really give a shit when her former boyfriend, Miles Kane, texted her about music because, in Rob's view, quote, no one's better than me, so whatever. And I guess, like, it's just so interesting to see what these celebrity couples sometimes they give quotes and they're like, this is such a cute story of ours. And I'm like, that's a red flag. Saying it's just in the language of it all, right? Like, if you're dating a guy and he doesn't care about who you dated in the past, that's fine. But she said, quote, didn't really give a shit about any of her exes. And I can't help but think, is she's trying to say subtly, he doesn't really give a shit about anything. So who knows? There was also this Love is Blind prank call between them when Suki called up Rob, prank phone call style, to say that she had been offered to host Love is Blind. And he awkwardly said, what an interesting turn of events. When she suggested that they co-host together, he said, quote, darling, have you gone mad? And then when she revealed that it was a prank and the call was going to be on the internet, he said, quote, no, I don't want to. And it's just so funny to me. Like Robert Pattinson, when he's by himself, it's totally fine to lie to the press and make things up and do all of these goofs and gags and pranks and say that fans have peed on you and I saw a clown die and all of these things. It's fun and games. But then when your long-term girlfriend, who I think at this point, like they had a baby together, did that and she wants to do it with you publicly, because you do all of that stuff publicly, you're like, oh my God, no, have you gone mad? No, 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 I don't want to do that. What's all that about? So I don't know. So they do have a child together, and the way that the pregnancy announced, even that was kind of reminiscent of the relationship. So Suki Waterhouse was performing at the did I say it right? I did. Okay. She was performing at the Corona Capital Music Festival in November 2023. She took to the stage. She was wearing the sequined dress number outfit. And she told the crowd, quote, I thought I'd wear something sparkly today to distract you from something else I've got going on. And she gestured to her stomach. And then she said, I'm not sure if it's working. So that was how everybody was like, oh my God, she's pregnant. Now, apparently there were some people in Rob Pattinson's innermost circle who didn't even know that she was pregnant until she announced it on stage. So I feel like there's, it's such a fine line of being a celebrity and saying, I want to protect my privacy. But at some point, it almost feels like he's keeping his partners, whether it's FKA Twigs or Suki Waterhouse, like a secret, like a shameful secret or something like that. You kept me like a secret, but I kept you like an oath. So anyway, I just thought that was very odd. Like your friends are finding out that your partner is pregnant from Coachella at the same time everybody else is because you didn't tell them? What's going on? So now we have to get to the idea of Rob Pattinson and Suki Waterhouse secretly being married, because at the premiere of the drama in March 2026, so last month, a reporter asked Rob and Zendaya the biggest secret they've ever kept. And Zendaya said, quote, nothing that comes to mind, with a smile. And Rob said, it's the same one that you have. And there's all this chatter that Zendaya secretly married Tom Holland. So a lot of people were saying, wait a minute, is Robert Pattinson also secretly married to Suki Waterhouse? Apparently, insiders say that he has been calling her his wife for a couple of years, and they think that the two of them may have tied the knot months before their daughter was born in March 2024. So maybe he's been married for like a long time. Who knows? Who knows? So that's about it on Robert Pattinson. And I have to say, I think my view changed on him for the worse. I don't think that he's like an evil piece of shit like some of these people in Hollywood are, but I think he definitely gets a media shine and polish that is not afforded to certain other celebrities. And I think he's also, I really don't like how he was with FKA Twigs. So I think before this episode, I kind of thought that he was an eccentric, funny, quirky guy. And now I'm like, there he is. He's there. I don't know. And I get it. Of course, like fame is traumatizing. He came up in this very suffocating fame machine. He was a heartthrob. People had dolls made out of him and his like sparkly torso was everywhere. And he came up playing a character that he absolutely hated. So maybe there's a bit of him that's resentful and that's why he acts out and lies in interviews, even though he also lied all the time as a kid and a teenager. But I don't know. I still don't know who Robert Pattinson is, but I think the one trait that I can hone in on and identify within him is cynicism. I think he's a cynic. And I personally subscribe to the Conan O'Brien quote where he said that cynicism to him is one of his least favorite traits. He doesn't think it leads anywhere. And I completely agree with that. I think that when you're cynical, I think it clouds a lot of your true personality traits. And I think it also clouds your potential. Like it clouds the potential that you have to love, to fail, to get knocked down and get back up again, to give generously. Here's to splitting the bill on every single date, to risk, to laugh out loud. Like when you're cynical, you also have a little bit of suspicion woven with being cynical, and it just puts a damper on all of these great traits that somebody else could have. I feel like cynicism is just like a muffler. And I think he's really been benefited by the media for the past few years because he lies and they say it's so delightful when Robert Pattinson lies. And then he's pretentious and they go, he's so eccentric with the things that he does and says. But when you look a little bit deeper, I think it's kind of murky inside of Robert Pattinson. I'm sure he's fun for a little bit and maybe is a good person to work with on set, or I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not like trying to say something nice at the end of the episode. But let's just say, like, I do not think he would be I don't think he would lift you up as a partner. You know how sometimes they're like, pick the partner where you feel your absolute best and shiniest around them. I don't know if a lot of people feel that way about Robert Pattinson, but I feel like I need to be nice. Some people say, by the way, anytime Xander and I go viral for like a TikTok that we make, which is not that often, but they always end up doing very well. A lot of people think my boyfriend Xander looks like Robert Pattinson. And let me tell you, our second date, we were talking about celebrity doppelgangers, and he said that he had sometimes gotten Robert Pattinson. And after 3 drinks, I was like, I'm going home with Robert Pattinson. So that's my opinion on him. I'm so sorry because I feel like every single person, I don't think I've ever heard anyone dislike Robert Pattinson. I think everybody likes him. So I'm so sorry. My ass is ready for spanking verbally online. But if you don't want to spank it and you want to leave a review or share this with someone, I would super appreciate it. That is my deep dive into Robert Pattinson. Thank you guys so much for listening. I will see everybody on Patreon for another episode on Friday. And I'll see everybody else next week. Bye, guys.